Good day, gentle viewers. In today's news, trailers and PVs galore for the next season's sequels. English streaming service HIDIVE starts a comeback, and we finally catch up on all of the weekly anime rankings that have been built up as we moved locations here and continue to get set up. So, without any further ado, my name is Tristan Gallant. Welcome to Glass Reflection. Let's jam. We are less than a month away from the new anime season, and you know what that means, right? Advertising the heck out of the upcoming season and making firm announcements on what is in store for us next month. Now, I'm not going to attempt to sit here and bring up every new single announcement in PV that gets thrown out there and released. There are going to be far too many to do that, and honestly, most of them won't be of interest to everyone, and I'm more than likely going to be covering each and every one of those series as we go through the new season in the coming months. However, what I do want to do, and what I am going to do, is focus briefly on sequels. I usually ignore sequels during my seasonal talks because it's only, worthwhile to talk about them to those who are already fans of those shows. And hey, if you're a fan already, you're probably watching it without me telling you to do so. So bringing up what shows are getting a sequel here, I feel like will be much more worthwhile. So let's talk about some. Dr. Stone is getting its third season, continuing its post-apocalyptic Stone Age-like adventure from where the last season left off. Now, Dr. Stone, I always thought of as an interesting tale from a semi-meta perspective because its first season was extremely well received when it launched back in 2019. Best of season type of release and reception. But then it seemed like its second season just happened to get swept away by everything else that came out around the same time. So I'm not sure how many people are still keeping up with Dr. Stone, but I am glad to see that the series itself is still getting an adaptation as time passes. To Your Eternity is also getting its third season, though its notoriety in the West is far lower than that of Dr. Stone, much to my disappointment. Season 1 of To Your Eternity was fantastic and one of my favorites of its time, but like Dr. Stone, and even somewhat unlike Dr. Stone, any hype or viewership for that series I felt got swept away by other shows that happened to be on offer at the same time. Perhaps the third season of To Your Eternity will convince some people to come around and watch everything, but we'll have to see. Tonikawa is also getting a sequel, but we already knew that as we got a PV image a while back, but now we have a trailer. This one I am super excited about as it was one of my favorites. Favorite anime of 2020, not even just of its genre, but of the year. I am behind on trying to keep up with 2 OVA episodes of Tonikawa that have launched since the first season ended, but this will hopefully be the kick in the pants that I need in order to catch up and be ready for when the second season launches. It looks great. You can't handle the wait for that. We also got another trailer for The Ancient Magus' Bride, and I know that I am, at this point, starting to sound like a broken record when I say that I am excited for these sequels, but this is the one that I'm excited about the most. Even if it is shifting gears to some kind of magical academy arc, which some people might look at as a negative, because normally I would say, historically within these fantasy shows, there is a little bit of a negative thing, a negative connotation about going to a magical academy and having an arc take place there because it's been done a lot. However, in my case, I have just spent the last week and a bit of my free time not making videos catching up with the light novel of Ascendance of a Bookworm, which includes its Magical Academy arc, and it was probably one of the better sections of its story. Some disappointing things as well, of course, but that story is so huge I can't expect it to be a win all the time. But Bookworm showing me what a good Magical Academy arc can be like just makes me as hype, or perhaps even more hype, for how Magus Bride might end up doing it, because I've already enjoyed everything that Magus Bride has done up till this point, and I've been worried about what it might do in a Magical Academy arc. So now that I know that it is possible to have an actual entertaining Magical Academy arc, I'm even more excited. The last sequel with a trailer that has recently come out is for the next part of Gundam The Witch from Mercury, i.e. the best Gundam series that's come out in a long time, which is something that you can quote me on. I know that there are a lot of fans of Iron-Blooded Orphans, and I'm definitely not trying to diss Gundam Thunderbolt either, but personally, I would rather rewatch Mercury than either of those two from the Gundam franchise, right? It will be interesting to see where Mercury decides that it wants to go after the finale of its last batch of episodes. Semi-spoilers. It did some interesting things with its main characters. There's definitely going to be strains on interpersonal relationships. I'm hopeful for major shakeups in universal politics. So with luck, we won't be headed backwards to some kind of status quo from like the midpoint of the first season, and the plot will actually meaningfully progress. But all of these shows are coming out in the next month, and again, I personally cannot wait. This next story is a little bit older, but we missed it as we were on break, and I didn't see it make waves anywhere, despite, you know, it really should have done so. So we're going to talk about it. AMC Networks, the parent company of anime streaming service HIDIVE, recently struck a deal with Japanese broadcaster MBS that gives them exclusivity to a number of anime from MBS's upcoming programming block in Japan. Now, this is noteworthy, not just because it is an exclusivity deal, but also just because of who is involved. Now, MBS in Japan is the broadcaster who aired anime like Jujutsu Kaisen, Haikyuu, Attack on Titan, and if you want to go back far enough, Full Metal Alchemist. Now, HIDIVE has not ever been the biggest kid on the block here in the West, but they are one of the few last bastions left in English anime streaming that hasn't been swallowed up by Sony and their fried sushi company. It is important to note that the exclusivity contract does not cover all of MBS's anime. To be clear, like, we're not gonna suddenly start seeing Attack on Titan or Kaizen get yoinked off of Crunchyroll and put into HIDIVE instead. That's not what's happening here. What this deal covers is not an insignificant chunk of the upcoming anime in the future. And now the fact that there is going to be a good relationship between MBS and HIDIVE means that the monopoly might not be as big of a monopoly as some people have been worried about. It still does need to be worried about, just simply because of how much capital that Sony happens to have. But I would like to see this as a step in the correct direction, especially since HIDIVE has been in a somewhat desperate need to claim upcoming anime licenses because, again, they don't have the capital to throw around and join like production committees like Crunchyroll and the late Funimation have been known to do. So this definitely helps them stay above water for the time being, and perhaps in the future it'll end up giving them a show that could be the next big thing in the coming years. I am all for competition. I do not personally want to live in a world where all of the anime that streams in English only comes from one provider, especially when that provider has no incentive to fix any of their problems with their platform or provide meaningful services to their users. So right now, I am personally in the camp of anything that can help HIDIVE is probably a good thing. But just how good that this deal will actually be is yet to be seen. Now, before we continue, I did want to give shoutouts to supporters of this channel over on Patreon. Because yes, this video is not sponsored, and the more support that we get over there, the less sponsors that Glass Reflection will need here at any given time. So an immense thank you, especially to patrons like Hector Montemayor, Wago221, Deluxe Flame, City Yamako, Ryfen Bonaparte, Ross Emerson, and Omar Showman. We can't continue this without your support, so however much you are able to help, I am eternally grateful. We have quite the considerable backlog to get through as far as the anime trending rankings happen to go. There have been a number of weeks now that we have missed because we have been away. New episodes have come out, new shows have gotten popular or less popular, have progressed in their stories to varying degrees. We are now on week 9 of probably 13, though not every show is going to get 13 episodes. And it'll be interesting to see how things are going. Now, we're going to start with the current rankings as they stand. And then, if necessary, we're going to backtrack a couple of weeks to make sure that we don't miss anything that may have been of significant importance, like a show randomly jumping out to, like, first, which didn't happen. But if it did, that would be something that we were going to be covering. Now, the rankings as it currently stand, we have the biggest jump of all, which is the most recent episodes of Vinland Saga, jumping that series up 4 positions all the way into first place. It knocked out The Angel Next Door Spoils Me Rotten, it knocked down Magical Revolution of the Reincarnated Princess, and it knocked down Tomo-chan Is a Girl. This is not surprising considering Vinland Saga is amazing, but the reason why Vinland Saga hasn't been like constantly #1 is because, as I think I've mentioned during its season 1 airing, is that it is a slow burn series. So we're going to have major things that happen in particular episodes every once in a while. And I fully expect Vinland Saga not to stay in the one constantly, even though it probably deserves it. The show that I think has been fluctuating the most over the last number of weeks, though, has been the magical revolution of the reincarnated princess and the genius young lady. But having been keeping up with that show intimately, I can absolutely see why it keeps bouncing, because there have been an episode, it almost seems like every other episode of that show has not been all that great. As far as like actual progress of what is happening, there have been major questions, at least questions that I've had as to where things are going. The plot seems to be moving extremely slowly, and even at this point, if you asked me to summarize everything that happened in this show, I actually feel like I could summarize all like 8-9 episodes that are out now very simply. I don't think that's a good thing, because for a show like this that is kind of story driven, it's not like it's a slice of life or what have you, it comes off as a show that is supposed to be very story driven, that's supposed to have a lot of major things happening, and they just haven't. Now, in the midsection of this week's list, we had Onimai, Ice Guy, and Nier. Nier has made a major comeback in the last couple of weeks. I wonder why. Maybe it's because it's not been delayed anymore, and it dropped off the list because it hadn't been airing for a number of weeks. Now Nier is back. It is slowly making its way up the list. According to the chart, it jumped up 3 positions since last week, which is quite impressive, especially when you consider we have both Bofuri and Bungo Stray Dogs Season 4 re-entering the chart. Now, the interesting thing there is, if you have 2 things that have re-entered the chart, the question becomes, what got kicked off? So if we back up 1 week to actually find the answer to that question, we learn that Miss Nagatoro's second attack, or second season, it got kicked off. It was previously in 9th position last week, but far more interesting to me, very far more interesting to me, is that last week in the 3rd spot was Buddy Daddies, which had gone up a space from the week even prior to that, but now it dropped from 3rd to off the top 10 entirely. That's an interesting thing. I'm not actually fully up to date with Buddy Daddies. I have been trying to keep track with it, but it's like one of those mid-tier ones, at least in my mind, that I'm following, but I'm not like actively watching the new episode as it comes out. So I'm not entirely sure what the hell Buddy Daddies did to deserve getting knocked from 3 off the top 10 entirely, but it's interesting, and it happened. Now, of course, there are things like Ice Guy that's still on the list. I'm gonna have to watch Ice Guy now, aren't I? That's gonna be this thing. It's gonna be taunting me. It's gonna be continually taunting me. It has been on the chart every week since the start of the season. So the people that actually vote, hopefully you guys, and you know, some other people of course as well. Everybody that votes on this has been watching Ice Guy intently and has been saying that it is really, really great. And apparently I was just absolutely wrong for saying that it was boring and mid. Maybe I am wrong. Maybe it is not boring and mid, but I'm also loath to actually find out about that, because the last time I did that was with Inspector, and Inspector hasn't been on the list for a while now. Yeah, Inspector got kicked off the list weeks ago. And it still hasn't made a comeback, so who knows? I'm happy that Bofuri is back on the list. Hopefully, with it being now off of its delay period, we weren't entirely sure how it was going to continue for the remainder of the season. So with any luck, it'll actually be able to keep going. What this entire chart means is that you should be watching Vinland Saga. I hope that's been made clear in today's episode. You should be watching Vinland Saga. And if you're not, it's either because you don't care, in which case, well, you're wrong. Or, you know, if you're not watching Vinland Saga because you are waiting for the series to be over and watching it all in one go, that is perfectly viable and understandable. I get it. But as long as you're planning to watch Vinland Saga, I don't have a problem. Granted, I guess by that logic, it would also be, hey, go watch The Angel Next Door Spoils Me Rotten, and I'm not going to tell you to do that because I'm not even doing that. So, yeah. Hopefully we'll see what happens in the next coming weeks, because we are reaching the end of this season. There are only 2 or 3 more charts that we will have before we move into next season. There are only a couple more weeks until I actually have to sit down and start watching all of the new stuff for next season to make a similar video to what I did earlier for this season, and that'll be fun and interesting. But that is it for our show today. So subscribe if you haven't. Hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. And until next time, whenever that happens to be, watch more anime and stay frosty.